Living in Hong Kong, I'm already more or less living in a cyberpunk city, minus the edgy hair. Before its release, I was actually kinda looking forward to Cyberpunk 2077 and see how much it resembles my city. CD Projekt Red never disappoints on the aesthetics. However, unlike its half-brother, Cyberpunk is not a game I wanted to play twice. Cyberpunk 2077, the most anticipated game 57 years before its time. I think it's objective to say many fans weren't satisfied by Cyberpunk. But we all have the question, how is it that The Witcher 3 was praised as something like a game of the decade? And Cyberpunk didn't make us feel equally ecstatic. Maybe the developers didn't get enough time. Maybe Keanu Reeves ate 90% of the budget. Please note that The Witcher 3 isn't a perfect game and I fully intend to release a video listing its sins after this one. But to begin, unlike the billion so-called reviews out there, this video will focus on the design and won't talk about bugs and performance at all. I think these technical issues overshadowed the underlying design flaws that piece by piece made the game less satisfying without you realizing what's wrong. But these flaws were exactly what The Witcher 3, the studio's previous main title, was strong at. Let's discuss in detail where The Witcher 3 is strong yet Cyberpunk falls short, which even if bug-free, doesn't reach the bar set by The Witcher 3. Please note that The Witcher 3 is pretty much a one-of-a-time masterpiece. So losing to it wasn't that much of a shame, so let's begin. Remember to watch the full video to get the full idea. What is open world without the world? You got it. It's just open. A wide sea with water, and salt. Of course, I'm not here to talk about the underwater design of both games. Different settings, different waters. In comparison to The Witcher 3's world, Cyberpunk's world becomes monotonous, full of rubbish NPCs with zero depth. Not talking about Panam or Judy, don't light the torches yet. Most named NPCs in the main quest, and a few others are fun, but I can't say the same for any NPC on the streets. What? Do I expect every Joe on the street to give me a teary tale? No, but I'd expect every Joe to at least eat and sleep in an open-world game. Let's face it, Cyberpunk's NPCs have no life at all. They're just humanoid moving objects on the streets who say mean things to you.
Kiss my dead spunk!
Let's look at The Witcher 3. The NPCs have a life. What surprise? They work, sleep, drink and laugh, chat with each other about things Geralt has done. And some of them just might give you a quest. And in 2077, what makes one human? I promised you I won't talk about bugs. These aren't bugs. These are designed and scripted and basically the only thing those NPCs have ever done, walking aimlessly or staying at one location forever. They don't feel like humans, but rather, as I said, humanoid moving objects. I don't think the NPC system should be improved. It should be destroyed and done anew from scratch. I get that Europe isn't as cramped with people and buildings as Hong Kong or New York. And believe me, as a Metropolis resident I think that's a blessing. But I suggest that the developers fly to Hong Kong or Tokyo and observe for a few days what the residents of a cyberpunk-like city actually do. We might not be happy, but we're not robots. Yet, if Cyberpunk developers interviewed anyone actually from the middle or grassroots class in Hong Kong or Tokyo, I believe the NPCs in this game would have been much more interesting. For a starter, the dialogue could make the player feel the struggle of someone who isn't rich in a cyberpunk city instead of
Kiss my dead spunk!
Cyberpunk simply has a few meaningful side quests compared to The Witcher 3, not counting the character quests. Type in the comments the quest you remember in The Witcher 3, then do the same for Cyberpunk, and you'll get what I mean. However, in this part I find it more meaningful to compare the lesser quests of both games. Aka, contracts and gigs. Who cares if the quest just fell from the sky, as long as it gives experience and reward. That probably wasn't in the mind of Cyberpunk's designer, but it's exactly what happens in the game. Here, I compare The Witcher 3's contracts and Cyberpunk's gigs. In The Witcher 3, you have to first pick up a notice from the notice board, then talk to the contract issuer about the job. You probably don't read the notice anyway, but the contract issuer will explain everything for you. Then, you inspect the evidence and trails, find the monster and finish the job. In Cyberpunk, the fixer calls you whenever you're near a quest location, gives you the details, then you accept the quest and do it, usually a simple objective. You think the only things missing here are the reading notice and investigation processes. I would argue that the whole fixer system itself is an utter failure. Not because the quest just flies to you out of nowhere, but because there's not a trace of emotion in the gigs. Remember, game is a form of art, and art is only art if it incites emotions. Without emotion, a quest is only a meaningless chore. In The Witcher 3's contracts, you talk to the contract issuers themselves. They have their stories with their monsters, and it's all observable in their voice acting and facial expression. The dialogues are full of character building for the contract issuer and the monsters, which all build up to the final confrontation with the monster, and sometimes even the contract issuers. Whereas for Cyberpunk's gigs, the quests are usually nothing but business transactions to the fixers. They only want the gig done because the client paid them. Emotions play no role in the quests. Often you're just told to kill someone or steal something with little context. Other times you may be told a brief version of the gig story, but it's cold and empty on the phone, spoken by one who has no emotional attachment. These all make the gig shallow and meaningless to the player, and ultimately a filler in the game, a waste of your time. Imagine every contract in The Witcher 3 is accepted by Vesemir, who kinda sends a raven to tell you,
"Hey Gary, that monster is trouble. Details in the notes."
And said notes are never read by the player. A pity that some of the gigs do have good stories, but they're ruined by someone who doesn't care, not to mention most players are voluntarily illiterate.
Bruh.
Stop putting all information in text. Your players are humans, and humans in general like hearing a story better than reading biography. This problem wasn't serious in The Witcher 3 because Geralt would recite the letter's key information if it's important. But in Cyberpunk, even the background story itself is put into the fixer's message. And very often the player never knew the guy they killed. Do you see the problem here?
If CD Projekt Red is willing to reinvest some of their precious revenue, it's really pretty easy to fix the fixer system. Sorry, pun intended. We all know the fixers have no emotion for the gigs. So make the fixer tell you to talk to the client whose brother actually died or whose friend actually got kidnapped. Make the client tell you the true story. Most of the fixers have as much personality as a notice board anyway. Some people are gonna argue that the proposed system is inconvenient. True, the quest does fall from the sky right now and saves you the time. But let's remember how blindly opting for convenience usually makes games lose their colors. Convenience is good, but when it kills the game's personality, the designers should avoid it like cyberpsychosis. But fixer aside, the gigs simply have no personality and are overwhelmingly monotonous. How so? Most of The Witcher 3's contract monsters are unique in that they have a story or personality. For example, the catechin in Oxenford who likes alcoholics, making Geralt to get drunk just to lure him out. Twists like this make many quests enjoyable and fun to do. However, with so little narrative and character development in Cyberpunk's minor quests, the gigs targets all have zero personality or have their personality written in a message that few would ever read, making the process of killing them a chore and unsatisfying. It always follows the enter building, do objective, get out model with little memorable narrative, reducing Cyberpunk into a highly repetitive game. Answer me honestly, do you find the Noon Wraith in White Orchard or the Tiger Claw boss in that bar more intriguing? Take the buildings away, you won't be able to tell where in Night City you are, but reduce the city into rubble, you can still recognize Novigrad from the fire and the racists. This tells us a big problem of Cyberpunk's world design. The game is overly reliant on the visuals to wow the players, but lacks depth or a narrative beneath the glamorous neon signs and high poly models. In The Witcher 3, every map has its own storyline, or at least a theme. Velen is a wasteland about war, the Bloody Baron and the Crones. Novigrad is a city about bigotry, witch hunters and crimes. Skelliger are mountainous isles about spirituality, choosing a king and the Skelliger's warrior culture. Even White Orchard is emphasized on war and Nilfgaardian rule. And these aren't just reflected in some long-ass codex or a few lines here and there. The whole map's narrative and visual experience are built around its theme or storyline. Whereas in Cyberpunk, districts only differ in architecture styles and local gangs, except Pacifica, which is essentially Cyberpunk's Wakanda. There isn't a storyline or theme in, say, Watson or Haywood, and you won't be able to tell which part of the Night City it is without the buildings and gangs. This can be easily explained and tied to the other parts, such as the lack of meaningful NPCs and narrative-driven side quests. I think Night City offers better visual experience than The Witcher 3's maps. However, its narrative design outside the main quest is extremely shallow, since there isn't really a story in each district. As a side note, I am working with some talented people to create a Skyrim mod that brings Alinar Cityaka, the elven capital, into the game, and I surely did learn what to avoid with Alinar from Cyberpunk. Building a glamorous city is important to lure players in, but free the world's narrative of its depth. A game is at best a city simulator instead of an RPG. There is romance in the details of world design. Someone once mocked J.R.R. Tolkien for essentially giving every tree a backstory. But to be fair, that kind of detail is what made Lord of the Rings a coherent and compelling story. Few fictional work can compare with such a legend. But at least The Witcher 3 was going for the same approach in detail, whereas Cyberpunk 2077 went the other way. Choices are the most direct way for the player to influence the game's world. After all, having been the unmovable system's pawn most of your life, you want something that you can change. It's also probably one of the reasons you chose RPG for a genre. However, I think choice is not only a way for you to impact the world, but also a way to reflect your personality and values. What would you have done in this situation? What would you have deemed the lesser evil or greater good? I think that reflection combined with changing the world according to your beliefs is the biggest reason people like choices in RPG. In The Witcher 3, choices exist everywhere. People live and die, wars are won or lost because of the player's choices. And the impact of these choices can usually be felt and are reflected in the NPC's banner. In my opinion, more importantly, you're often tasked with moral dilemma, or in The Witcher's terms, choosing the lesser evil. While it's Geralt who faces these questions, it's ultimately you who click the dialogue options to answer them. In Cyberpunk, choices are minimal. I think not much needs to be said about it because not much can be said to begin with, since the only quests with meaningful choices are the 2 quests CD Projekt Red advertised, the ending and 2 side quests.
What would have happened if we hadn't met with the Militech agent? Or told Royce about the agent and her plans? Or just decided to buy the bot ourselves? So many options, so many possibilities, and each will have consequences that will ripple through the game world and your story. And that's just one quest.
And 3 others. Even those choices presented in Cyberpunk are contained in their respective quests and have no impact anywhere outside them, not even a single random NPC's comment. The lack of choice and the insignificance of the choices that exist simply make the player feel disrespected and the game underwhelming. Someone on my Discord server argued that choices aren't necessary in every game. True, The Last of Us was a linear story with minimal choices and also a massive success. However, Cyberpunk as a genre needs choices to be complete. Like The Witcher, it offers no lack of philosophical questions for you to answer. Does technology make life better? Are you free in unrestrained capitalism? Cyberpunk as a genre asks these questions, but Cyberpunk 2077 never gives you the opportunity to answer them, and often just offers shallow dialogues where you say I agree with this or show the middle finger to the other guy, then bust off, and still come back anyway because you have to complete the quest. Choices aren't just a cheesy way to decide who lives or dies, but also a mirror for you. Cyberpunk 2077 lacks this mirror for its majority, making the game extremely uninteractive and underwhelming. Cyberpunk is a massive game, that's a given, so I probably need time to write about the choices that could have been. Write in the comments to tell us where you thought could have been an opportunity for choices. What makes you play an RPG? I believe most of you wanted to interact with a virtual world and leave your mark on it. We've talked about quest choices, so this part is about how your actions change the open world. In The Witcher 3, the open world reacts to Geralt's actions. For example, the abandoned sites all over the map are initially inhabited by monsters and bandits. When you clear them, people would move back into those sites. Through your intuitive actions, you've restored hope for the people, changed the outlook of villages and towns, and left a mark on the open world. Random NPCs would even thank Geralt or comment on his actions. In Cyberpunk, there are reported crimes and street fights. V goes there, kills everyone, loots treasure, then be off to his next goal. There's no visible impact left by V, like how Geralt liberates an area and resurrects a town. Basically, Cyberpunk is full of these fine stuff, kill stuff objectives with little context and impact. Not to mention most NPCs are blind to V's actions and give no meaningful comments. You never see how your actions have changed or even interacted with the open world. I'm not an expert in open world design, but I'll later make a video about how I would improve the open world if I was a designer. Haven't you ever thought that you're fighting basically the same things all over Cyberpunk? Gangster, corpo, with some machine guns, robots and drones here and there. And the tactics you use against a gangster is practically the same as a corporate security. In The Witcher 3, there's a high variety of monsters. Different monsters have different fighting styles, and therefore different tactics to counter. For example, in Draga are venomous, wraiths can teleport, and wolves hunt in packs. Tactics against Neckers is vastly different from Arakase, or humans, because, what surprise, Neckers fight differently than Arakase and humans. In Cyberpunk, generic humans are mostly just what you'd expect from an FPS game, except for cyber ninjas and the jacked animals. Netrunner enemies seldom net run against you in combat, despite that being a big thing in the Cyberpunk setting. And even when they do, there's virtually zero threat. As for robots, the variation is just big robot, middle robot, and small robot. Different gangs have their unique looks, but that's about the only unique thing other than Tiger Claw's ninjas. Wait, even that wasn't unique. In short, there isn't variety to speak of, both in aesthetics and gameplay for the enemies. Humans may look different to each other, but they mostly fight the same, while robots are really just those 3 guys all over the place. Take these repetitive bad boys out of the game, and you'll be left with an empty night city with nothing but a few cyber psychos. Variety is the key to replayability. If The Witcher 3 had you fighting the Wild Hunt exclusively from start to end, and the Wild Hunt had only troopers and dogs, most people won't play past Act 1. I would have put this part in another video, but if I offered some suggestions here you would have a clearer picture what I'm talking about. If I handled enemy design, I would open more cyberware to the human enemies, such as the hand missile and super jumbo jump. Different cyberware combinations should create new fighting styles for the enemies. Then add something like Suicide Attacker, Swarm Hive Mind that controls mini swarm drones. Robots could also use much more variety to complement the lack of monsters or animals in Cyberpunk, such as an angel-shaped Peacebringer that hacks enemies' eyesight and uses wing blades, bull-shaped charger that charges at enemies and release shockwaves, or some crazy robots with the maelstrom that look like something out of Lovecraft's novel. Then players won't grow bored fighting the same metals every time. Enemies could also use different functions and tactical combo. I might describe in greater detail in another video the kinds of enemies I would have wanted to see in Cyberpunk. Every story has its beginning, and the beginning gives your fans the most important first impression. The Witcher 3 wows everyone with its prologue, but Cyberpunk's prologue tells you nothing and makes you feel nothing. In The Witcher 3's prologue, the player is first introduced to Geralt's relationship with Ciri, Yennefer and Vesemir in the dream, allowing the player to bond and sympathize with Geralt and the characters. Then in White Orchard, player is shown the grim Temeria in the post-Nilfgaardian invasion north, where people are frightened and take to extremes to survive. Everything tells you something about the setting and the atmosphere. You can see the nature of Witcher's work and the contempt people have for Witchers, the fear they have for Nilfgaard, the clash of nationalism and survival, with a mix of philosophy and moral dilemma, and in my opinion most importantly the terror brought by wars and the scars left by trampling war horses. These all lay the groundwork for your expectations for the rest of the game and get you to vibe with the game's core themes by moving your emotions. And rightly so. The rest of the main plot and many side quests are closely related to the messages conveyed in the prologue Akka, War and Lesser Evil. Next, to Cyberpunk's prologue, which is a bit ambiguous. Some say it's the Lifepath quest, some say it's from the Lifepath beginning to the heist. I consider the prologue to be just the Lifepath quest, and the heist thing being Act 1. Let's use the Corpo Lifepath as an example. The first scene has V talking to his friend about his work in Arasaka, describing how stressed he is at his work. Then his boss summons him, and on the way he talks to the other co-worker about their work. Then V's boss tells him to kill someone he hates in the company. V calls for his friend's help, and it seems the woman he was going to kill got the upper hand. V then got kicked out of the corporation. In the end, he becomes a mercenary. The prologue didn't make me vibe with Cyberpunk's setting, nor did it foreshadow anything meaningful to the plot. None of the characters makes me care or matters at all, except Jackie, who will die in the next few hours. That's right, the prologue bears no meaning to the story except making V a mercenary. If you remove the whole prologue, your experience would still be the same. The prologue failed to grasp my attention or make me feel excited about Night City, while I enjoyed the moments with Kaer Morhen and White Orchard's characters. Storytelling aside, the prologue doesn't tell us any message that Cyberpunk as a genre wanted to convey, such as unrestrained capitalism and technological advancement. In short, the prologue in Cyberpunk is basically meaningless, though I guess it does set the theme of worker exploitation, since V was stressing so much that he vomited in protest. In another video, I will make some suggestions for a more intriguing and narratively reasonable prologue. Subscribe to check the video's progress. I may do a video to discuss the parts that I think Cyberpunk did better than The Witcher 3, or where they did equally good or bad. But for this video, do you agree with me? Or did you find this to be a one-sided, unbased comparison? Tell me what you think in the comments, and remember to subscribe to get wind of my new videos where I'll give suggestions or ideas for redesign for Cyberpunk. Thanks for watching, and let's talk again next time.